Well, everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer. Welcome to Lost in the Wasteland, my weekly interview show where I get to get a deeper dive into somebody's perspective on movies. And my pal Vinny here, from who I've been friends with now for
12 years.
12 years. And we have reached the point where Vinny has gone beyond my general questions, and it's time to do some interviews based off of his film curriculum, which will be Denis Villeneuve films. And because we're doing this last minute, we just picked one that's pretty fresh in our minds, so we picked Dune. But Vinny, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
And before I jump in, if you want to shamelessly plug anything and tell people where to find you.
Yeah, I have a movie review blog called cinemaconversations.blogspot.com, and my Twitter handle is at Vinnie Abbatecola, and you can find me there.
Until I buy it for $8, and then I become Vinnie Abbatecola. Oh, Twitter is a wild, wild place right now. So there you go. But yes, we are talking about the Denis Villeneuve adaptation of Dune, or maybe you could consider it Dune Part 1 because we're getting to Part 2. So I guess kind of have to call it that, unless they're using a subtitle for the second one. I don't know. We're going to find out. But this came out in 2021. I know I personally had a fun story about seeing this because I went to go see this with our friend Joe from the movie club and my wife. And I got my booster, my COVID booster, at noon that day. And then
it made you loopy.
Well, I had about 12 hours. I got at 10 o'clock in the morning. I had about 12 hours before that thing would hit me like a truck. And we went up to Neshaminy and saw a double feature of French Dispatch and Dune. And walking out of the theater, I'm like, feeling a little off, better get home. And by the time I got home, I just collapsed on the couch. And I'm like, did it. So specific timeline. And I didn't even talk about the two babies that were in the movie theater crying the whole entire time.
For French Dispatch or Dune?
Dune. That would have been really weird if somebody bringing babies to Dune was weird. But I feel like it'd be even weirder bringing babies to the French Dispatch.
Well, I mean, either one of those movies, it would be weird to take a baby to. But I was just curious, which baby or which movie those crying babies were in.
Both of them were in Dune. And then there was a teenage boy who started yelling at the babies, and I'm just sitting there like, "You're not helping. That's not making this situation any better." That was by far the worst theater experience I've had since coming back from COVID.
I mean, seriously, parents, just if you can't hire a sitter, then just stay home with your baby.
You decide to have this child.
Yeah.
Most likely, even if it was an accident. And you have to pay the consequences. You just have to wait to go to the movies for a little while.
Yep. Don't ruin the 2.5-hour sci-fi epic for everyone else.
Exactly. You could have easily just, paid for HBO Max for a month and then just watched it at home. And your baby could have been yelling at home, or could have been asleep in their crib. Could have saved us a bunch of trouble.
But you know what? Shout out to Dune for making as much money as it did at the box office, even when it was on HBO Max.
Yeah, despite the fact, because I think it was basically that and Godzilla were the only ones that made a substantial amount of money.
Domestically anyway. I remember those two being the only ones that hit 100 million domestic.
Well, good thing that was such a great decision, and Warner Brothers is in such a great shape right now. Because they're not. But anyway, so this film is directed by Denis Villeneuve, and this is indeed an adaptation of Frank Herbert's classic science fiction novel, Dune, which is a whole entire series. And
I've only read the first one.
I have only read the first one too. It is a very dense collection of science fiction, but this film won 6 Oscars, including sound, visual effects, production design, music written, original score written for a film, you go Hans Zimmer, um, film editing, cinematography, and then so like it won basically all the technical awards that it was nominated, pulled a Mad Max Fury Road
Under Gravity.
and a Gravity. And then it was also nominated for Best Picture, makeup and hairstyle, costume design, and screenplay. Because my God, trying to adapt this into a film, but we're going to get to a question about that. But this obviously got a lot of attention when it came out. It won 6 Oscars and was nominated for Best Picture. But Vinny, do you feel like Dune really lived up to this praise that it had? And or do you think it should have gotten some more praise from the Academy, including somebody getting nominated for Best Director who was not?
You know what? I do think it deserved all the praise it got because it is or was known to be like a very unfilmable book. Not so much because of like special effects, because we've gone several Star Wars trilogies and Lord of the Rings, but really just because of like how dense the mythology is of that book. But we'll get into that later. But just just like really the way it was able to adapt the book to not only satisfy fans of the book but also casual moviegoers. It really does speak to Denis Villeneuve's talents, and obviously I do think it deserved every Oscar that it won. He should have been nominated for Best Director. Yes, that should have won Adapted Screenplay because of how difficult it is to write a screenplay for that book. And as far as like what would make up this past year.
That was Cruella up for that one.
Cruella
Costume?
Cruella won costumes, which I didn't care for Cruella the movie, but you can't not award the costumes in that.
Mm-hmm.
And then makeup and hairstyling, that was the eyes of Tammy Faye, but
yes.
But
the most makeup.
Yes. just like Suicide Squad 6 years ago.
There you go.
When that won. but yeah, I was happy with Dune's success at the Oscars. It did turn out to be the most awarded movie that night, and I was happy for it. That movie was in my top 10 of 2021, and so I'm happy that it was well received by both critics and audiences.
Absolutely. And there's no argument people can make that didn't deserve the technical awards that it made. It's like, what else would you have given it to?
Yeah.
It's an absolute jaw-dropping epic of science fiction and what it was able to do with all those different technical aspects. And obviously the big argument of like, it didn't direct itself, kind of thing, where it's just like, how did you not nominate him for Best Director with all those other? Because like the Mad Max example, George Miller was nominated for Best Director, should have won. But
that year was pretty good. That was a pretty competitive directing year.
Well, yeah, I know he. Are you talking about 2021 or when?
2015 with George Miller.
Yeah, I know.
But he was my personal pick to win that year.
Yeah, and like Gravity, because Cuarón actually won Best Director, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like those technical aspects just don't like come all together themselves. So like there's obviously a big argument that Villeneuve should have at least been nominated.
And actually, like I'm just realizing that like between Dune, Mad Max, and Gravity, there like those are 3 times when those are three times when Warner Brothers released like like a science fiction epic, and it ended up, it received critical acclaim, but like great box office receipts, and all three of those movies ended up being the most honored, or the most awarded movies at the Oscars of their respective years.
Hey, I really hope Warner Brothers doesn't lose that.
Yeah.
I know, to be honest, I know they make some really dumb decisions with their money. Because, like, to be frank, they probably shouldn't have spent $150 million making a Mad Max movie. But, I'm glad they did. And like Blade Runner 2049, they probably shouldn't have spent $175 million making that movie. But they did, and we're happy. Yeah. At least those who saw it. We saw it.
It should have been a bigger hit than it was.
Yeah, they marketed it, though they poorly marketed it, so that helps. And it's also based off of a movie that flopped when that came out, so there you go. But it's so interesting because like this is, and I'm going to skip ahead to the question because you had already brought this up, but I guess elaborate a little bit on why you think that this book is perceived as unfilmable.
Well, I remember like I read it about for the first time about 3 years ago, because I was I read it in the beginning of 2020 when Dune was gonna come out later that year. So I was like, all right, awesome, I'm gonna read the book, I'll be ready for the movie. And then we all know what happened. But anyway, so I sat down to read the book, and like it does absorb you right away, but like because of it does that typical thing that like a lot of like sci-fi and fantasy novels do, like they kind of in the beginning they'll throw a lot at you in terms of like the nouns they use, and like all these names for like the people, the planets, all these customs. So like you do have to take your time when reading it, just so you can like keep track of everything that it's presenting to you. So I'm trying to think. So I'm sorry. So the question was why it would be unfilmable? Is that what was the question?
Why you feel like it's perceived to be unfilmable? Because obviously they've done it twice. So
yeah, and right, and like I said earlier, like obviously special effects have, well, I mean obviously back then special effects weren't like special effects weren't that great, so that was a bigger issue then than it is today. So in terms of adapting it today, obviously you can like do all these crazy worlds and everything like through visual effects and like expert practical effects, but still there was that issue. How do we adapt this movie with like this rich but very dense mythology, and make it palatable for people who haven't read the book but are just walking into the movie like looking for a great time. And like I really do think they were able to like I don't want to say watered down, because that means they took out a lot, because like saying that like it's like a negative connotation. But like what I'll say is that like they did a good job like giving you like more than the basics of what you need to know, but still being able to like make it understandable for the audience. And like you said you read the book, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you remember how like there are like a lot of intricacies and like how characters interact, and like this person's gonna betray this one, this person betrays that one. And I was actually as intriguing as that was in the book, I was happy that they took a lot of that out of the movie, because with a narrative like this, you can really only do so much, and I think it was a case of them really knowing what they can take out from the book, but still remain true to the source material.
Absolutely. And it is one of those kinds of things. And obviously, they made the decision to split this up,
Mm-hmm.
which that has become a pretty common occurrence at this point with big books. And
this is a book that really needs that two-part treatment.
Yeah, and because it's so dense, and we'll get to actually figured this would be a nice segue into my next question, but we'll get to that in a second. But when you look at this film in terms of, and you brought up a good point about the special effects, like certain films like this, you need to wait until technology has caught up, like in the world of like artificial intelligence, AI from Steven Spielberg, like that waited years because they just didn't have the technology to make it work. And, certain things, it's like some films push technology forward. And this film has incredible special effects.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those like dream never made movies to check out would have been Hodorowski's Dune. And like I love that documentary that they made about.
I've been meaning to check that out, but it's one of those movies that keeps escaping me, and like I forget to give it a watch.
Oh, it's such a great documentary. It came out around my birthday one year. I like was so excited to rent it on VOD to watch it on my birthday that year. And it would have been a weird ass movie. Like weird. A lot of the production design sketches from Giger were recycled for Alien.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so like they made all these things that look like, oh my God, this looks like Alien because it was going to be Dune. And then he just used that and put it into Alien when he was brought on board to that.
Which is interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, like just like a really quick segue. It makes, speaking of Alien, now that I think about it, Dune does kind of feel. Dune kind of does feel like a sci-fi, like the type of sci-fi movie that Ridley Scott would make. Which is funny because he did Blade Runner, then Denis Villeneuve did Blade Runner 2049.
It's interesting because like obviously Ridley Scott got his hands on Raised by Wolves, which was his big sci-fi thing that he's done recently. That was on HBO Max.
Mm-hmm.
Weird show too.
I've never seen it. I've heard of it, but I just haven't watched it.
I didn't love it, but like it definitely was interesting. But you have all these things, and being able to, if you have the right director and the right writers, you'll be able to make something work. Sometimes you have to be a little creative with it. I know, just to confirm, both Vinny and I have not seen the David Lynch version of this, but I've seen parts of it and stuff like that. And, I'm sure that's a very interesting adaptation as well, because it's Lynch. But I think a nice segue question for this, because one of the biggest criticisms that many people had, and like I felt this a bit too, is this story presented in part one satisfying enough on its own as a film? And Vinny, how do you feel about that idea, about the satisfaction that this specific installment of this story gives?
I think as part one of a two-part movie, it does obviously it doesn't feel, obviously it's not, I guess it's not meant to feel like a full experience, but let me rephrase that. It feels as full of an experience as a first part of a two-part movie can feel. Obviously, like we said before, this is a book that needs the two-part treatment because of how much world building there is, how much you have to introduce to the audiences in terms of characters, locations, like the culture of of the different races of the cultures of the different races of people within the movie. And you know it's a 2.5 hour movie. I it does I feel like it does take its time well in like establishing whatever it has to establish. And you know what, like it gets to a certain point in the, like, far into the movie where, yeah, a lot of stuff has been introduced, a lot of stuff has been set into place. So now we can write out the rest of part one, and then at the end of part one, Paul and what's the mom's name? Rebecca Ferguson's character.
It is Lady Jessica.
Lady Jessica. So at the end of the movie, Paul and Lady Jessica, they then decide to group with the what's the race of people that they meet up with, the Faroukans, or
I should have set up my own appendix to sit here and be able to utilize during this interview, because that's a funny thing, because like that probably. It's like every time you go to the theater, they hand you a booklet just to help you keep track of everything. Here, wait a minute. So, because obviously it's House Atreides who comes to this planet.
Right.
And come on. Just give me Wikipedia for something here. So because we have, where is the Freemans?
The Freemans. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. So I was kind of off with my naming of them, but yeah. So at the end of the movie, you have them teaming up with them, and that's meant to get you excited for part two, because well, obviously if you read the book, you know what's going to happen. But for the people who haven't read the book, it'll get them excited to see like, all right, so how are the people from like this noble family gonna work with this group of outsiders and like take down the Baron? Is it the Baron?
Yeah, House Harkonnen.
House Harkonnen. Okay.
Yes, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, aka General Kurtz.
Okay.
Apocalypse Now. Give me the spice. We'll get to that kind of in another question. When I found out that Stellan Skarsgård apparently ran around naked on set because he just loved the fat suit that they had him in, it's just hilarious.
I didn't hear that story.
Yeah, apparently he had a lot of fun with the prosthetics that they gave him.
Well, I mean, there was that scene in Thor: The Dark World where he runs around naked. So
there you go. Maybe Stellan Skarsgård just has a thing for it, but there you go. Now, a more basic kind of question. This is more of like your taste and what you enjoyed about the film. But what are some of the scenes that really stood out to you in the film?
You know what? I've one scene I really like is when they're getting ready, is when House Atreides is getting ready to depart for Arrakis, because there's that one shot where you have like that huge ship rising out of the water, and then you have Paul walking along the coastline with like the ships in the background, and then like it transitions to like a shot in like space where like these little ships are flying out of like this bit, this bigger like spacecraft, and then just like that, like them landing on Arrakis, like you can feel the heat just with the way that planet is is presented. And then, and obviously like the scene when they go out to fix the spice mining
Yep.
machine, and then you see the you see the
Worms.
sandworm, and just, and then not to go on and on, but just one last thing, with the sandworms, like at the because like I think like in the book they make a big deal about like how much goes into learning how to like tame and ride one of those sandworms, and you see like a quick shot of one of the Freemen riding a sandworm at the end of part one. So
Just a tease.
right. So then when I saw that in the theater, I was like, oh, I can't wait to see like them act. I can't wait to see Paul like actually like ride one of these things in part two.
Yeah, that was a big tease. Like, because they had that little tease earlier with the one woman who was like looked like she was getting ready to do it, but then she got attacked, like right before she was able to do it. But yeah, this you can tell like Denis Villeneuve had hints of these things in Arrival, of like the ships and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And then he was probably just sitting there like, I want an excuse to make like everything. And just like you just see the ships and everything in this film, which is absolutely fascinating, with just the interpretation of all of that. And I'm on a roll with all these segues tonight. But now, Vinny, you read the book.
Mhm.
Sitting and watching this film, what were you feeling in terms of Villeneuve's interpretation of like the design of the worlds, the ships, like the outfits, all those kinds of things? Was it like, do you feel like it kind of hit on like when you were sitting there reading the book, this is the world that I kind of imagined? Or do you feel like it was something very different and nuanced that Villeneuve was able to bring to the project?
Um, I do like the way he presented Frank Herbert's world to to his movie. Because why, like, because what, reading the book, like, because of like I said, they throw a lot of stuff at you, like a lot of like names for things and such. So like when reading the book, I had a very heavy sci-fi fantasy view in my head as to like as to what he was describing in the book. But I feel like Villeneuve was able to do like his own he was able to like do his own spin on it, and add his own little things to it without without sacrificing the vision that Frank Herbert brought to his book.
Absolutely. And because, like I alluded to a little bit with some things looked pretty look kind of similar and interesting in terms of how things were structured and designed with. You see a bit of a rival there. Obviously, he had Blade Runner 2049 before this. So obviously this isn't like brand new to him doing like these science fiction kind of films, but like I appreciated because like it doesn't feel completely foreign and like crazy out there in terms of like the
Right.
costume designs and stuff like
Mhm.
that. It feels grounded in some kind of reality, but it still feels like you're lost in some kind of place in space.
Mhm.
And, you know, he just knows how to capture the scale. And like, I bought this on 4K. So next time I rewatch this, I'm looking forward to watching this on my 4K disc and just being like, look at it. Look at all these ships like just flying through space and everything. And like that when that worm comes out of the ground for the first time. Also, finally got my sound bar to start working on my TV.
Oh, nice.
So it stopped yelling at me. So I'm going to be sitting in my living room when the like sandworm comes, you're like shaking, 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 shaking. um, he created an extremely immersive world, and it's something quite impressive. And like obviously, there's similarities because like I know you haven't seen the film, but like you've obviously seen pictures of like Lynch's Dune and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And there's similar things. And like I'm just thinking about the Jodorowsky's Dune and thinking about how ridiculous that movie would have been in terms of like the design and everything. Like they had Salvador Dali involved and he was cast in the movie.
Oh, wow.
And just like would have been completely out there. But you know, you watch any Villeneuve film, it feels very stark and very grounded. Even like
Mhm.
Blade Runner 2049 with all like the neon and stuff like that, there's still like a groundedness to it all.
Mhm.
Now, Vinny, how do you feel that Dune stacks up to other modern science fiction films? So like think about like past or well, you know, let's just for the sake of it since like 2010 because just over 10 years, like where do you see this stacking up amongst some of its peers when it comes to science fiction?
I think just the fact that they were able to like just the fact that they were able to like to make this movie out of what was seen as an unfilmable book. I mean that's that's just that's just an achievement itself, and I think people are going to remember that what when they think about sci-fi movies sci-fi movies from like the 2010s and the 2020s, just because like in an age where like we're in terms of like big budget in terms with like big budget movies, like in a time when we're getting like so many like Star Wars and more and Marvel stuff, like when you have like when you have like a sci-fi movie like this that's based on like one of the most popular sci-fi novels of all time, and you make like this you make this epic movie out of it that like it matches the vision of like what's seen on the page in Frank Herbert's novel. Like it's really it's commendable. And just I feel like Denis Villeneuve, like he could very well be one of the best sci-fi directors of our time.
Which I find so fascinating because like you watch Prisoners, you watch Sicario, and like even like Enemy and stuff like that, and you're just sitting there thinking, wow, he might make such penetrating dramas and thrillers and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden he hops in to do Arrival and then Blade Runner 2049 and
Mhm.
then Dune, and you're just like, holy crap.
Yeah, I mean, like I mean, with his sci-fi movies, like in terms of scope, it just seems like he gets bigger with each one, and each time he succeeds.
Absolutely. And gives a lot of hope for part two as well, and
Hmm.
whatever else he winds up trying to tackle in terms of science fiction. And I feel like there's only two other science fiction films for me in the past 12 years that really capture the kind of scale and immersiveness of the world that he creates in Dune. And one of them is his other film, Blade Runner 2049. And Fury Road's the other one. But, you know, it's something really impressive. Now, throwing some praise to some of the other people involved in the film. This is this is a stacked cast.
Mm-hmm.
Who are some of your like standout MVPs of the film that you feel like really step up and help carry this film?
Well, not including Timothy Chalamet, since he's the star of the movie. You know, he was very good, obviously, but just just so I don't give the cop out answer of like going with the star of the movie, I'm gonna say the MVP for me was Rebecca Ferguson,
Mhm.
because I don't know how to describe it. There's just something about her that's just it's like she has such like a magnetic presence
Yep.
that just like really translates well to her acting abilities. Like she was, like I've seen her in not Rogue One, Rogue Nation,
Yep.
the fifth Mission Impossible movie, and then Fallout, and then for Doctor Sleep, she was probably my favorite part of that movie, because like she played such such a great villain, and
Mhm.
she never went over the top with it. Like she just she played it subtle. She was creepy, but like she really drew you into like the character she was playing, and I think I think she did that just as well with Dune. She had like the regality of she had like that regality of of like being in a noble family,
Mhm.
but but she was also like not subdued, but she was. I'm trying to think I'm trying to think of a way, like she was. I'm trying. I'm trying to think how I could describe it. You know what she like her character's personality. Like she had like a quiet personality,
Mhm.
but you could sense the power behind it.
Absolutely. And she could have easily just fallen to the wayside in those two Mission Impossible films, in a film that's like, this is a Tom Cruise movie, but she stands out
She
and
does.
she really makes a big impact. And oh, Rose the Hat is one of my favorite horror film characters
Hmm.
in recent memory. She brings something unnerving to that film. And even something like The Greatest Showman, where she pops up in it, she's just a really fantastic actress, and she really does. She's scrappy and resourceful, the Lady Jessica, and for me, the the performance I'm gonna remember for forever after watching this movie is definitely Stellan Skarsgård. Like, just like, there's no way I'm not remembering that performance.
And just like consider, like when you think about how great this cast was, and then you think of part two, how we're gonna get Florence Pugh, Austin Butler, Leah Seydoux, and Christopher Walken. I mean, it's they're gonna take a great cast and make it even better.
Yeah, we're gonna get that
I
space walking. It's just like how House Atreides. And what
Nate's
I'm excited about is that how often have we actually gotten a substantive Christopher Walken role in the past 20 years? Not a
I
lot.
I mean
So
I feel like I feel like the last I think the last movie I might have seen him in was Jersey Boys. And I mean, he was fine in it, but it's not like a top tier Christopher Walken performance.
basically, the only two performances I could think of that really stood out to me for him relatively recently is one, The Jungle Book. I love him as King Louis. Um,
Oh, that's right.
he's a
That's right.
giantificus gangster. in the
He,
middle of the
yeah,
jungle.
I totally forgot he was in the Jungle Book. He did great voice work for that.
Yeah, and then Seven Psychopaths, honestly, is the last live action performance where I'm just like, dang, he was really, really good in this. And it's a shame because like it's Christopher Walken.
Mm-hmm.
On some level, he's more cowbell. He's kind of like a meme at this point, but like I'm excited.
In the case of Dune, it's gonna be more bagpipes.
Yep, there you go. Oh, and then you throw Florence Pugh into anything is just gonna get people's attention at this point because she's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And good for Austin Butler. I'm sure that was a big, like, sought after role for a lot of people, and he got it. See how he does.
He did right. He did right by Warner Brothers with Elvis. So
there you go. They're like, bring us the money. Now, Vinny, what do you feel like are some of the influences that you noticed of Villeneuve's film and like what he brought to the table? Obviously, besides the book,
right, yeah.
You're adapting this.
What? I know this might feel like a basic answer, but just like given the world building that was accomplished in the original Star Wars movies, and then the Lord of the Rings movies, and like how well all of that was paced out, and like how those directors were they made movies that didn't just have a great story, but they were like big epic special effects movies. And I feel like because of what was accomplished making those movies both narrative wise and technical wise, I think that's something that allowed those are definitely factors that allowed Dune the movie to happen.
Well, and there goes Warner Brothers again with Lord of the Rings too. They know how to really put in and invest in a film franchise like this and be able to build those worlds. And yeah, it's hard to see a epic kind of scale like this without thinking about the influence of something like a Lord of the Rings that was able to do all that world building into those films. And then, I can't help but think, like, obviously there's some very specific nods to other films. Like, I already referenced Apocalypse Now, because 100% that first scene where we see the Baron, where he's just completely naked, shot in shadows, and like he's rubbing his head. I'm just like, my God, he's Marlon Brando. Which, fun fact, Orson Welles was supposed to be in Hodorowski's Dune as the Baron.
Oh, I can see that.
Yep, right? And especially at that point, like, it would have been such a disgusting performance. But like, it's interesting because like there's definitely some, I feel like Villeneuve had to pull off, like, I feel like he has to be a horror movie fan on some level, because like there's definitely scenes in like this, there's scenes in Blade Runner 2049 that are so like creepy. Like that test that he does with Charlotte Rambling's character, like that's so eerie and creepy. And like I would love to know what his influence of like the Harkonnen, that one planet that they go to with like the roar.
Oh yeah.
Like that was creepy as hell. I'm just like, I don't like this. This is not right. I don't like this at all.
Like the way that location looked, it definitely reminded me of a couple of the locations you see in Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could like obviously Villeneuve has an eye for science fiction and being able to do that kind of world building, and it's just it took him until now to be able to get those opportunities to make films on this scale. Now, I guess Vinny, my second last question is what. So like there was a review that I watched of Tragedy of Macbeth from Breakfast All Day, and Alonzo Giraldi, who's one of the critics that I like to watch a lot on YouTube, made a point of nothing about Joel Coen's film felt like this needed to be made in this year. Like when you're going to adapt something and make a new adaptation of something, I feel like on some level you need to be able to connect to the world that you're in right now. And I find that an interesting perspective to have on any kind of adaptation or reboot or anything like that. But do you feel like there's anything in particular that made Dune such a timely adaptation in 2020? Because that's when it was supposed to come out. But 2021.
You know what, and you know what, in terms of its themes, like I know like I know I know like it has a strong environmental message. It tackles stuff like religion and politics. I mean, I feel like it has plenty. In terms of themes, it has plenty going on. Where like you could release this movie at any time, and it would, like, you know, it would feel relevant to some degree. In terms of it coming out today, for me, like, I basically feel like it's not so much about, like, I feel like it's not so much about the themes, but just the fact that at this in this period of filmmaking, where like a lot of stuff is possible in terms of like in terms of like special effects and everything. It was just like, it just so happens that at this time Denis Villeneuve was able to make this movie. He released it. Good for him. As I said, the movie does have several themes going on, so I'm sure people who watched it were able to connect to certain things. And I'm sure if this movie was released, in 2041 instead of 2021, people would still be able to find something to connect with.
And by that time, maybe they could fly on the ships too. There you go. It's like that immersive. One thing that popped in my head, and I might be drawing too thin of a connection here, but like I feel like this wouldn't be made today if it wasn't for like Game of Thrones. Like I feel like that series really stoked like sci-fi and fantasy of let's talk politics and like different kinds of like political games and stuff like that, because obviously this story draws upon that a lot. It's all about the spice and manipulating the spice flow, and you have all these different houses at odds with each other and stuff like that. Obviously, Dune existed long before A Song of Ice and Fire, and I'm sure George R. R. Martin had some kind of influence from something like Dune. I just find it interesting. Like, I feel like Game of Thrones kind of opened the door for something where like this high science fiction world dealing with politics, and I know people made fun of it when Phantom Menace came out and said that it was about a trade dispute. Just like, what the hell is this? But like, this film basically is that, except done a lot better, obviously.
What? I mean, also, like, people don't really go into a Star Wars movie expecting talks about trade and economics and such.
Well, and this is a very heady, very dense science fiction story, and it's a marvel that Villeneuve was able to do what he did. And my last question for you, Vinny, is what are your hopes for part two?
I have strong hope. I do have strong hopes for it because he's done so well. What he's done so well with part one, he can really only go up from here. As I said, it seems like with each sci-fi movie he's done, he goes bigger and better, and he accomplishes that every time. I'm sure that's what's going to happen with part two. I know I talked about the worm riding earlier, and I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of that. I'm looking forward to I'm looking forward to I'm hoping they do have the duel between Paul and I can't remember the name of the character that Austin Butler is going to play, but in the book there's like a as there's like a really cool duel between them. So I'm hoping Denis Villeneuve follows through with that and delivers on that, which I'm sure he will. And now that everything is set in place and like the world building has been accomplished, I'm looking forward to see how he really propels the story forward towards the conclusion.
Absolutely. I'm excited. I'm waiting for a lot of action.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like Denis Villeneuve is promising that for part two. Because there's a lot of setup. And it's time to blow up and go on and really hit its stride in the second film. And that's coming 2024.
No, 2023.
2023. 2 years after the last one came out. Yep.
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah, I looked it up before. It's coming out November 3rd.
Oh yeah, it's almost 2023 already. What the hell?
Yeah.
So yes, we're in mid-November 2022 already, and Vinny. Well, first off, thank you for doing this last minute behind the scenes. Thank you there, but thank you as always for coming on and chatting movies with me.
No, my pleasure.
And all of you out there, if you haven't seen Dune, what the hell are you waiting for?
And read the book if you haven't already.
Yes, pick up a book. We read too. But thank you as always for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.